In the 19th century, there arose a school of thought calling itself progressivism, a word that has, by the way, revived in recent years in American politics. I'm old enough to remember when nobody said that word, except friends of mine who were writing about these early progressives. Some of them teach here at Hillsdale College now. But what did these progressives think? They believed in progress. They believed that things were always getting better. And they also believed that change was the characteristic phenomenon. Every age is different from the age before. Every age has its own thoughts. And we should accept that and seize the opportunities that come from it. What about that, though? Things do change a lot, right? One thing that might be a sharp difference is that these progressives say that the Declaration of Independence is obsolete. And yet it was a good thing for its time, they say. But of course, that's not what it says. What it says is it's a good thing for all time. If it's false now, it has to have been false then. True then, it has to be true now. Remember how we started out all of this by talking about the Declaration of Independence as a sort of final cause? And we quoted Lincoln and we said every nation has a central idea from which all its minor thoughts radiate, right? You have to ask the question, does this new revolutionized kind of government, is it designed to serve the principles, the same principles as the old kind? Is it after something different?
Yes.
And you say yes, why?
I think the introduction of this new ideology of progressivism has changed the direction of government to protecting and deriving its consent from the governed to protecting these new positive rights as opposed to negative rights.
Yeah, I wonder if that distinction works myself, but you're talking about a famous essay by Isaiah Berlin, I think. There's a lot of ways this point is put. The way he put it was negative rights. You can't be stopped from doing things. Positive rights. You get stuff. Right? That's his distinction.
And that need creates these agencies to fill those needs.
But do you think people should be allowed to starve? Fellow citizens should be allowed to starve?
No.
No. It should be stopped somehow, right?
Yes.
You think it should be done in the States?
I believe that that's a plausibility.
Yeah, that's what I think. Well, the great phrase is, bring the full power of the national government to bear on this urgent problem, right? That's a kind of language. If you go read Ronald Reagan's famous 1964 Time for Choosing speech, he mocks that phrase, bring the full power of the federal government to bear upon it. Because you could help the poor locally, as we used to do. And you might even do a better job of it, because it's possible that if you did it through the local churches and community groups of various kinds, that they would really look out more generally for the welfare of people. Whereas entitlement programs might breed dependence. Yeah, so you don't like that, but I'm gonna quote somebody to put the point. In our Constitution Reader, we read the progressives. If you look at the Constitution Reader, by the way, it's a very interesting document because most of the text that we read in the Constitution Reader are written by people who don't like the Constitution of the United States. That's kind of the story of our country, right? It's always been an argument. John Dewey's argument is, it's a new world, really different. And as the world changes, he goes on to argue, it changes how we think. John Dewey says those principles in the Declaration of Independence, he says those fit for a pioneer agrarian society. People thought like that, right? Back then. And so everything's changed now. And another thing has changed. We used to not like cancer if we could identify what it was. Now there's a chance we could cure it, as we have cured many things. Science is a lot more powerful. We could get rid, maybe, of birth defects. And if we could do that, maybe we could make the babies smarter, bigger, faster, stronger. Stephen Hawking has predicted that we won't look like the same kind of thing in 100 years, or 200 at the most. Human beings will be unrecognizable because they will have remade themselves. So the old idea, and just think how starkly different these two things are, right? The old idea was we're human, we're capable of really great things, says the Federalist, and we're capable of really bad things, says the Federalist. And so we need to arrange the government so that there's a bias in favor of the good things we can do. And government should be limited just strong enough to protect us from one another, and don't give it absolute power, because men are not angels, true enough, and they have to have government, but angels do not govern men. That's one world. And another world is, wow, look how much more we can do. By using these techniques, let's do it. Let's get going here, right? Let's solve these problems. Let's get these checks and balances out of the way. Let's stop this kind of government that's offset against itself, so it's always hampered and always a problem, right? That's the argument. And if you just look at the power of modern science, look at the incredible things it can achieve, doesn't that argument have great force? But you tell me, what's wrong with the argument?
I don't know that I'll be able to fully develop this, but it seems like the last couple days we've really established that the true genius of the Constitution was separating the sovereignty from the power and keeping those two things separate so that they can check one another and keep an eye on one another. It seems as you move towards this bureaucratic structure that we're talking about, you create like other tyrants. You create health problems or economic problems as tyrants. So in order to combat that, you have to they're arguing to recombine that sovereignty and the power and put them in the same hands to combat that. But then we forget that fundamental principle in the Declaration of Independence, like all men are created equal. And when we yoke the sovereignty and power again, then we challenge that very thing, that all men are created equal.
You mean, you're nodding, what are you going to say?
Well, we're talking about how whether or not the principles of the Constitution still apply in a radically different world. But even if we're not an agrarian society anymore, we're still a society of humans, and human nature doesn't change. We still suffer from the same ills and make the same mistakes.
So you're both saying in different ways. You know, I think that there are 22 or 23 or something like that million civilian employees of the state, federal, and local governments. That's quite a lot. The great majority of them are state and local employees, by the way. I think there might be 2 or 3 million federal employees. That's a big force. And these agencies are powerful because they are all three branches. And in their subject matter, it's just a really fearsome thing if you get a letter from them. So that's a great power. But on the other hand, they're human people and they're well-meaning. But your argument is like Madison's argument. You're saying that these people are not angels, right? And so if they get a discretion, sooner or later, some of them are going to abuse it. And so that means that would constitute some limit on how far you'd go down this road that John Dewey and Woodrow Wilson and Herbert Crowley and these guys want us to go. I'll tell you 2 more problems about that. I'm going to ask you. Is it possible that Dewey is correct when he says that the principles of the Declaration of Independence were excellent principles for their time, but not anymore?
I don't think so, because in the Declaration, as we mentioned, it starts off very general and very universal. It's not talking about anything specific to that era. It moves into particular manifestations of violations of the general principles, but it starts off with timeless universal truths.
So that means what you're saying is, if it was true then, it has to be true now. And if it's false now, it has to have been false then. But see, here's another thing. You guys and I, we're raising this objection to the man, everybody here except Emily. You're raising this objection to the man that some things don't change, and the specific one we're talking about the most is human beings' capacity to dominate one another. You're saying that doesn't change, and you're saying that's nature. The excellence of the human being is nature, and the fallings of the human being are nature. And nature doesn't change. Because remember, we define this term nature, right? And this term nature governs, it starts with babies, it starts with seeds. But then it includes this fallenness of human beings, right? This capable of greatness, capable of evil, both. And that arrangement of government. And if you set out to overcome that, then here's the final question. If you can design your child any way you want to, or your society any way you want to, what standard will you use to design it? Hitler was big into eugenics. He wanted blonde hair and blue eyes, which he did not have. And he wanted great, assertive people who will at the same time obey everything he said, no Jews allowed. Right? And they were working on that. That was a project. So what if we have a project like that and we exclude nature, or for that matter, God, and we say, we're going to take control. We can make everything better. The question arises, what do you mean by better? What can give you any guidance? I can tell you what happened in Nazi Germany, right? Because they just go right down this road. And what it means is the guide that remains after everything else has been eliminated is strength. Only power can arbitrate. Now what that means then, I argue, is that these problems that come up in society, sure enough, one of the reasons we have the government is to help solve these problems. But if we think about it in the radically liberal way of Emily, or in the more strict constructionist way of me and James Madison, we're both in the same universe, right? And the reason we are is because we understand that, yeah, of course, we need to make things better in society. We need to treat people as well as we can treat them. But also, we have to be a little suspicious of concentrating power. Because what will be left of our ability to live our lives when everything is arranged for us according to the precepts of science? We hope that you have enjoyed this. This is our best effort, and a better effort than we've made, we think, to make you part of the class. Hillsdale is built on the view that the highest things to study are known and beautiful. The God is among them. That developing a good character through and toward studying those high things is the best kind of human life. And that this life is only possible by people who live in freedom. And so we have an interest in those blessings. We need a free country to do what we do. We need fellow citizens who are excellent fellow citizens.